Yes, viewer, welcome to the Impact Radar podcast. We are happening live here in Arua City. And remember, it's a millennium year, 2025, and I'm humbled to have two impactful youths on this radar. I remember we'll be piloting you throughout the year and bringing in persons who make change and who make change happen in our communities. I'm talking about the community of West Nile, where we have seen that we're thriving and refugees are doing better and even impacting the world in a better way. Just for starters, this podcast will be running your way every other time you come on this very YouTube channel. Remember to make sure that you tap on the bell and follow us every other time. You can also share to your families, your friends, and your enemies. They might also be able to pick some impactful stories right over here. I don't know where I can look from, but of course, there are two important people I'm hosting today for the first time on this very podcast here. Let me come to I don't know whether it is right or left, but where my eyes are facing to, just to briefly introduce yourself and the roles you play under AskNet, and we're looking at you as a person. I don't want to reveal it to the viewer outside there, but this is someone who has been doing great in terms of youth empowerment, advocacy. Take it all from there.
Yeah, so thank you very much for hosting me on the Impact Radar podcast. What is fun is that I host this podcast, and today I'm coming as your guest. So I think that's beautiful. My name is Jake Sana Soro. I'm a South Sudanese refugee. I think I came to Ghana in 2016, but I was born here actually in this country. I was born here when my parents fled war in what used to be Sudan back then, and they came to this country. In my capacity and role at the organization that I am working in and with, so we run an organization called Platform Africa, and I work as a team leader of the organization. And within AskNet, you mentioned AskNet. AskNet is a network that brings together a bunch of organizations that are led by South Sudanese in Uganda, but also across the border back in South Sudan. And the goal is basically to really empower the voices of youth as pioneers in creating independent media. And basically what that means, right? So basically we're talking about peace building, we're talking about media infrastructure, we're talking about access to information, we're talking about skilling and really important areas of skilling. I think Maramongo will talk about it later. But that's a little bit about me. I hear rumors that I'm a musician. I don't know if that's true, but yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for the Impact Radar, for viewers, you must be able to know that through this podcast, we put our guests in a very particular way. As a host, I want to come last to introduce myself to you, but let me turn on to the gentleman who has just been smiled over from the very time we clicked on here. Take it off.
Yeah, thank you, Aldo. My name is Malayamungu Richard, and I'm a South Sudanese refugee, and I'm based in Rhinocam, particularly in Eden. I am a co-founder for Community Creativity for Development, and currently we run the AskNet project. And at the moment, we have a project in partnership with Platform Africa, the Ask Mobile project.
Okay. Yes, viewer, my name is Aldo Adomati is my name, the host for this very Impact Radar podcast. Remember, as a unique podcast, we make sure that the guests are the biggest things here. I come last as the host, but let's delve into some of the discussion. It is an open check discussion. I'll check on you, check on him, and we make a segment together.
Yeah.
Let's look at some of the activities that you two have done. I'm looking at Platform Africa and C4ED. I tossed it back to Platform Africa. Some of the activities, the projects you've worked on over the years, just some highlights on them. If you can pilot us through.
Yeah.
Remember, it's the Impact Radar podcast.
Yeah. So just a little bit of correction. The organization is called CC4D, Creative.
Community Creativity for Development.
Exactly. So Platform Africa, our focus really has been around stabilizing refugee communities, and how we do that is we do it through programming in 3 pillars. So we have education, we have peace building, and then we do have a program that is cross-cutting, that is of access to skills or skills development. And so over the years, our organization, Platform Africa, has trained young people in photography skills, basic ICT. We've graduated, I think, over 90 people in 2000, I think 21, 22. This year, we're also starting the Rice Refugee Lab to train also a bunch of refugees on skills as ICT, web development, graphic designing. So basically, you could say that our work is setting up platforms where refugees can realize their potential. And yeah, so that's a little bit about what we've been doing over the years.
Okay, that sounds quite a lot of things you're doing right over there in the refugee settlement where we see now a lot of hopes coming through you. Let me also see the angle at which you're doing hopes in terms of you being a founder at CC4ED.
Well, again, we are CC4D, Community Creativity for Development. Yeah. So CC4D, our major area of focus is e-waste management.
Okay.
And over the past 2 years, we have only been involved in running community mobile repair cafes, where we go to community to villages, and then we fix devices, electrical devices, and also textiles in general. So the whole idea behind it is that we want to see at the end that refugees are able to repair their own device. They get their devices into use, and also on the side of skilling, we want to see that in the future everyone can kind of fix their own devices. Yeah. So last year we had 2 projects. One project is by the Migration Technology Monitor, MTM, and that is basically to skill 16 participants on ICT and general media literacy. And the same, we had this project with the Platform Africa on the Ask Mobile Lab project, and the whole on our side as Community Creativity for Development, we handled the electronic repairs and the textile upcycling. Yeah.
Just maybe before I walk over from you, let's look at the repair cafes and the recycling you're doing under e-waste. Uganda has gone for over decades of refugee intervention. A lot of electrical gadgets, computers, organizations have brought in, solar panels have been into the community. What could be the percentage of what you've done in terms of recycling this?
Basically, our major area of focus at the moment is the repairs, not really not recycling, but the repairs. And the whole thing is because when we arrived in the refugee settlement, UNHCR distributed hundreds of lights and radios to the refugees, but then we couldn't see somebody that comes over to fix when it's broken. So that's where we come up with the idea of having a space where the community members can come in with their electrical devices, and then we fix it for them. But of course, in general, in terms of percentage, we are not yet sure how much we have done that, because we just started, I think, 2 years ago, and we mainly focus on saying that every electrical device is put into use.
Okay. Yeah, let me also get it back to that is a Jack Sana for Platform for Africa. There's one big thing you look at media and production per se. The same media 10 years back was reporting refugees as a lot of issues, suffering, but now we are seeing a podcast media that is the Impact Radar, bringing that the refugees are also doing great. So how have you seen the landscape as you're doing media and media advocacy as well as production and skilling per se?
So that's a very good question. When we came to the refugee camp in 2016, I remember, I think it was July, August was when we were posted to Ariaza village. One thing that I quickly noticed is that, first of all, we didn't have radios, right? And so for refugees to access even the very basic information in regards to access to healthcare or information on peace building or whatever is really relevant for the people in the refugee camp was difficult. So this is challenge A. Challenge B is we didn't have internet or network for accessing the internet. And so for education, right, e-learning platforms for refugees to access that, there was a challenge there. But then there was another third challenge that we did not anticipate. And this is the challenge of misinformation, because there's no access to credible sources or platforms where refugees can go to access information. And so when we started our media production workshops. The sole purpose and aim was to empower refugees with market relevant skills. We want refugees to be able to come to Arua because Uganda allows for the freedom of movement, for them to come here and access jobs at Access FM or radio purchase and whatever and so on. Because right now, right, there's market for production and those kinds of skills. But then we realized that there was a different need and a different pattern that was sort of being created as an extension of that work. Refugees started using those skills to create local media, right? Or what they call community-centered media. And so they take recorders, they record people in the villages, record very important information about, like, there's mpox in the villages, right? What is mpox? Really get the facts and data correctly from the right stakeholders. Edit those information, put them on a radio or SD cards. Then these SD cards get distributed from village to village to village. People come together as listening groups, listen to the information, discuss them, have questions. Those sessions are then recorded, and then the cycle continues, and that's what we call community-centered media.
That sounds quite interesting. I just wanted to interject a bit.
Yeah.
Let's look at media in a way that a settlement like BDBD, like Arieze you're talking about, and it has a landscape, a land mass of land, and where the communities are in various cells. Let's look at how were you able to make sure this media is in a way mobile. It can be able to reach the extreme ends of the zones, or maybe of the refugees that are connected in two areas. Was there any interactive or innovative idea you brought forward?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I'm gonna start by really just mentioning key projects that I've seen in the refugee camps that I've tried to do that. One, I think, Save the Children, Uganda. They put megaphones in the refugee camps, and those megaphones are the custodians are community leaders, so they bring same almost approach. SD cards are put on the megaphones, and people in the refugee camp would access information on very timed periods, like maybe in the evening and stuff like that. And then I've BDBD, for example. I think right now already I said radio, which is really important because BDBD is the largest refugee settlement here in Uganda. But for villages like Ariaze or Omogo, where we're currently working, or Eden, or Tika, where our organizations are currently working in, we have a challenge that some of these villages, so the settlement pattern in Uganda is not like in Europe where people are put together in the same places. In Uganda, we have a refugee settlement, and then we have normal villages, right? Like actual villages. There's village A, these kilometers away from the next one. And the challenges that we started seeing is that, first of all, women don't get as much freedom as men to go long distances to attend trainings and learn media skills and stuff like that. That's challenge one. Challenge two is that there's lack of really concentrated interventions, like this town or urban-based type of villages.
Yeah.
And so our goal is, like, how do we reach, because our work is working with refugees everywhere, how do we go to these villages? And so in 2020, a colleague of ours from Germany donated to us a truck, like a whole Mercedes-Benz truck.
When you talk about Mercedes-Benz, maybe someone would be wondering, is it a Mercedes bicycle?
Nah, it's a whole van. I don't know what the difference between a van and a truck is. I really like my car lingo is horrible.
I think we will host a mechanic.
We'll host a mechanic. We'll bring Hervé from Kamaru. But yeah, so we basically took that truck. It was an RV, a recreational vehicle. And we had to remove the kitchenette area. We had to remove the floors. We had to put a studio inside the truck. Our idea is to build a very hybrid space for media production, but also media training, to be able to drive all these long distances, overcoming the challenges that women face traveling long distances. And to take trainings for these people in these villages. So that is the idea that we have come with. And interestingly, just to conclude, also our colleagues at CC4D who are not doing media production, but they're doing basically, I think, a very important sets of trainings that empowers, I think, also the media productions. Prepare, like, how do refugees fix their radios, right? How do you fix your recorder? How do you work together as a community to get rid of waste? So stuff like that, and taking it to all these villages.
Yeah. Let me get to it's quite interesting. CC for ED. You do a lot of repairs. I got canes when I tried to repair my mother's radio, and it really inspired me to work in a radio station. But now you are doing this just 2 years back. You're doing all this. Could you pick a story that has been sounding as an impact story about people who have done this? I would be happy to see their success stories about women also doing repairs in the settlement.
Well, during the project closer last year, um, Emmanuel Joka, one of our participants in the project, he kind of talked about how he was unable to fix his device from day one, ever since he arrived in the camp, or he had to pay somebody to fix his devices. But then now he's repairing his own electrical devices at home, and he's actually been a kind of that help in the neighborhood. Yeah, so I think that's really an interesting story, and of course a success to our site as Community Creativity for Development.
There's one story we grew up with. There's what we call the ignorance fee that the repair, community repair, people who take it more of profit oriented. Just like your battery gets over and someone tells you this radio, the toconfirio is gone. You need to replace the toconfirio. Now you as a layman, you don't know toconfirio, you have to pay a lot of money to buy toconfirio. So how have you changed this narrative that now Emmanuel is able to be a help to community?
First of all, I actually never talked about entirely what we do at CC4D. You know, CC4D is a space, and it's a space that contains some tools, repair tools in it, right? And people access these services through this space. He said he's helping his community, but actually what he does is come to our space, get the tools from there, and then fix the devices. So that means we have a record of what he's going to do in the neighborhood, right? So there, it actually means that a community member can come over to access more info about maybe the fault of the radio or maybe light or something before one of our participants or anybody in the community can be of help.
And there are moments whereby you've made repair to be like a hobby to people, events where people just come and gather, they pick things, repair them, open them, see this radio has a speaker like this and that. Are there events that you organize of such natures in the camp?
Yeah, when I talk about the community mobile repair cafes, I'm actually referring to that. Right, during the repair cafes, we bring in people, the expertise in repairs. By the way, that's what we actually do. Like we gather people from different villages, right? Like those experts to join our team, and then we support the community. So how we support it is that, like, we have this table here with a set of tools. We have the Ascotech. The Ascotech is a mobile training kit that contains all these tools for repairs, right? Maybe for next time we'll discuss more about the Ascotech. Yeah, but for now, it contains these tools for repairs. So let's say, for instance, Jexana is our client, right? And we, two of us are the expertise, right? So what we do is that Jexana comes over and sit next to us, and he watches us repairing, and we actually tell him what the problem is in the device, right? And sometimes when we see it's an easy thing or maybe an easy fix, we say, can you fix it, right? He does it himself. So basically, that's what Community Repair Cafe is.
Maybe before I cross over to you,
Yeah.
women are always in the kitchen repairing food. Have you seen women also repairing devices?
Yeah, we have had that a number of times. Last year, we had this project with, also in partnership with Platform Africa, the Women Inclusion in Repair Culture. And that particularly, we targeted women, ladies, aged 27 below, to see that they become, like the eye of their elders, actually. Yeah. So we trained them, and they were able to fix a number of devices in the community. And as I speak, actually they are the larger percentage that always access our space to get tools for fixing their devices. Yeah.
Quite interesting. Viewer, you watching the Impact Radar podcast. Remember, this will be running your way each and every time. I will also make sure my production team brings to picture some of the ASCO, the things we're talking about, the mobile van, we're talking about the ASCOTech, something that CC for Ilya has talked about in here. So these are things that are just running on the screen right here. But let me bring the focus back to Jackson and the platform for Africa, there's quite a lot you're doing in the kitchen. Can you bring it on table? Some of the things that I've seen, impact stories like Emmanuel is now repairing that. Do we have people who are now from your media trainings that are working in bigger media houses?
Yeah. Okay. So just like I wanted to comment on what CC4D has done. So we recently on the 20th of December, we were closing the project, the Ask Mobile Lab project. And as it's our tradition, we always invite the community to the launch, and then we invite them to the close of the project, so we can look at what were the outputs, what were the objectives together, sort of just fostering that idea of community ownership, and just strengthening accountability as well with the community. And one of the unexpected stories that I had about the work that CC4D has done is that there was a guy, a disabled guy. He had a wheelchair that he uses in the camp to access training places and basically like all basic needs. And his bike broke down and he could not go anywhere for months until CC4D repaired their bike, and now he can go to places. And for me, like if you think about projects, usually you're looking at 50 people trained, 10 people trained. But if you hear stories like that that are actually transforming and changing the lives of people, it really provides a different value or feedback to you about like the kind of work that you're doing. But just back to our media productions work, I kind of like want to highlight two stories. One story is in this village called Omogo. So Omogo is an extension to Rhino Camp, Omogo 4. This community, they basically started a community-centered media project by themselves. So they have bicycles, they have recorders, and they reached out to us and said, listen, we need to learn how to produce our stories. And so our team came in to the Ask Mobile Lab project. We brought the truck there and worked with them for a span of, I think, a week, training them how to record, how to produce. And now you find members of that community that were health medical personnel. They are producing, PSAs or CSAs on medical issues in the community and distributing that to the community via that SD card, speaker boxes, kind of production channel I talked about earlier. And for me, I think one of the most impactful thing about that group is that they have become sustainable. Right now, they have rebranded. They've become a CBO called CST. And for people who are listening, if you want to come to Omoga and help support this group, really come out. But another story that I really found that was really interesting was in our second training in Ofwatu. We were discussing about, like, for me, I like talking about distribution, right? Now you have created your story. Where are people going to find it, right? So we talked about distribution, we talked about social media, and when we were talking about TikTok, the conversation got a little spicy. People were like, ooh, we're TikTokers. And I get it. Like, everyone has a phone, you can set it there and you can make videos. But it's like, okay, so how many followers do people have? And usually, like, every room I go into, I'm the most followed. I have 1,000 followers. Every room I go to, like, I'm the Don, right, with 1,000 followers. And this guy's like, hey, this refugee here, he has 57,000 followers on TikTok. And I was like, what the heck? Yeah. Like, how is that even possible in the refugee camp? So I got to chatting with him, and I also I asked him about his interest in the training that we were doing. He said, listen, I want to make my own money in the refugee camp, right? And TikTok is a platform for me to do that. Now, the training that you guys are giving me is going to help me produce my audios and my stories better, so that I increase my chances of earning more on these platforms, whether it's TikTok or Facebook. And that really touched me because at the end of the day, we want these refugees to have the skills to create employment for themselves or become employable, right? Because sometimes there are people, but they're not employable. And so we want to change those dynamics. And the final story is a lady that was trained in 2021, and she went to South Sudan, did a consultancy gig for a huge organization. She got paid $50 per day for that consultation period. And I never got paid that much.
Wait,
and I'm really proud.
Let's look at $50 per day. That could be a budget of a whole settlement.
Exactly.
To some extent, to fund a project.
To a lot of people, that's like,
There's the key thing that keeps on sounding in your discussion. C4ED more than even Platform Africa, and C4ED knows Platform Africa more than even C4ED.
Yeah.
And this links CC4D.
CC4D.
CC4D. That's why I'm trying to say. I'm trying to know it.
Yeah.
Two of you like lime together your work. So what does it bring together for refugee-led organizations to be under a network that even makes them to work like not really organizations but partners in doing something great?
Yeah.
Let's look at this
Yeah.
AskNet.
So I will say a few things, and I'll ask Malamungu to say what he thinks. But for us, working together unlocks a lot of opportunities. One is that we are able to increase support, not support, trust from funders. We're small organizations with very big dreams and visions. And usually, if you apply for funding alone, they'll probably think that you won't be able to manage the funding you're applying for. And so, like, working together as local organization helps you improve those chances of you actually getting support and funding. But one of the key things that I think really enables our work really run smoothly like butter is that they are skilled differently, right? They have this set of skills that we don't have. They are personnel for that. We have a certain number of skills and resources that we have. So working together really helps us empower the community better. And for me, I think that is one of the things that is so underrated, especially locally in refugee camps. You find that people work in silos, right? People work alone. And for us, we want to be able to change that narrative by working together. And we encourage more people to join networks, not just working together, but also working in networks, like the AskNet network that we're part of. So for me, I think there's a lot of opportunities for networking, for sharing of contacts and all of that. Yes.
Let me put it to another context from CC for ED. Let's look at a lot of things you're doing. How do you measure your impact? And how do you get feedback from this community? Remember, you were talking about a community that has moved from crisis, that has come into the settlement, and now they're going to development. So how do you measure this impact and get the feedback straight away?
Well, it's a kind of difficult to assess impact, especially when you have just done a project, right? But we look into for instance, in the textile upcycling, we look into the products that are created by the participants, right? The products that are created by the participants, then the size of content that we've already covered in the settlement, and also having these feedbacks from the community leaders, because at the end of every activity that we do, we have this evaluation, and we give a chance for the community leader to speak, because whenever we have these activities, we have these community leaders that are always there to check on the work that we do. And of course, we also ask them. We ask them what they think. What they generally think about our work in the community, right? So it's a kind of really difficult for us to measure the impact, right? Instantly like that. But when we get these feedbacks from the community, and also having stories like Emmanuel Juka, who can now do things himself, and the community now entrusting him to repair their electronics, right? I think that is just some of the ways that we assess the impacts of our work in the community.
There are two things I would want both of you to interject on. One key thing is when you talk about issues to do with media and electronics, their tools are quite expensive, but we have open source tools that are over the years that have shown resilience, and where people who believe in coding, who believe in other things, they make it for community, like the settlements in here. So how would you tell a refugee or a citizen who is watching you right now here that actually open source tools are the best? And how have you been incorporating them in your repair cafes?
Well, these open source tools are accessible and they're cost effective. Generally, for me, I've actually come through this AskNet. Jacksana was mentioning how we are able to go to kind of collaborate together. But I think one thing he did not mention is how we came up as Community Creativity for Development. We were simply participants when Platform Africa and other hubs are already existing under the AskNet project. So we were participating in the project, and of course, being in Eden and not easily accessing Platform Africa as part of the AskNet network hub under the AskNet network, we then come up with the Community Creativity for Development. But of course, we used to just get the tools, most of the resources from Platform Africa, and of course, being funded by the German government, the German government so much focus on the open source resources more. So
There's one thing I
Being
just wanted,
free, yeah.
as we're moving on, the AskNet toolbox, which is more like a tool that
Yeah.
if someone was to go to the open market and their branded tools may be coming in from other brands I may not mention, they are quite expensive. And you have a box that can be able to repair the whole village. Yeah, well, that is it. But of course, well, to the viewer, that I want to say that make sure that you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and remember to tap on that bell right over there. It's an important bell, by the way. It should be able to give you that alert every other time you see a podcast being relayed right over here. But getting back to Platform Africa, Jackson, I just wanted to touch something very small on the open tools, but particularly, let's look at now. Someone talk about peace building.
Yeah.
And in the settlement that you do in this through media production, trying to make people to get the right information.
Yeah.
So let's look at peace building and we'll link it to this, and as well also look at the open source tool. Just pick from there.
Okay. I'll start with the intersection between peace building and open source tool or open source skilling. So for me, really just the basics. I don't think that any society would be peaceful if young people don't have spaces that engage them creatively. And in the refugee camp, it's really important given that, like, a bunch of people either cannot go to school and stuff like that. And so spaces like ours, Platform Africa, you talked about the Ascotech toolkit. Actually, I think the very first prototype was done here in Uganda when we came to the refugee camp, and we had a bunch of refugees, South Sudanese coming together. And the very first question they asked is, what do you need to run a training, right? Anywhere without internet, without power, right? And people basically came together, listen, I want a plier to be able to fix one thing. And someone said, oh, I need a soldering gun that works with batteries. Or someone said, listen, I need this part. And all those pieces and ideas formed or brought together the very first Ascotech toolkit that was used. Now, Platform Africa, the projects that we've been doing over the years under AskNet as well, most of them were very specific, targeting, example, the impact of technology on peace building and coexistence in the refugee camp. We have had the issue of hate speech. People get hate speech online, rumors, and then they impact how people live in the community. And our organization has used tools like local open tech training to bring people together to fix their radios, but also talk about coexistence in the refugee camp. I think that is really important as it gets. But also, like, really understanding how to train refugees to fact check and to do things like that. And also with the media productions, we have worked on a project called Salam Yekum. I think you've interacted with the project before. And the idea is, like, refugees, you learn how to map conflict in your village, to learn how to rephrase this conflict or fix it, right, together as a group, as refugees, and then learn how to create radio stories or dramas out of that, act it together with your peers, produce it, send it back to the community. Let the community hear the issues that they are dealing with, right? Let them hear the redress, the solutions you have come up with, right? And let's see how that transforms the community. And I think over the years, you've talked about the impact of work. So with peace, sometimes you really can't track, like you can't quantify peace, right? But we've seen a number of changes that has happened in terms of behavioral change, right? We find that there were communities that cannot interact, right? Why? Because the landscape of the conflict in South Sudan impacted how they live together in the refugee camp. Right now, they're living together, right? We had, people who the host community and refugees, sharing of resources was difficult. These people created radio dramas and talked about that and really opened the avenues for dialogue or dialoguing within the refugees and the host community. So I feel like there's so much to be done there. And so there's so much that can still be done. So for me, that is the highlight of sort of like, why these skills are important and like the work that it really drives towards.
Yes, viewer, remember we started this discussion from not knowing what they're doing, but now we're getting to know a lot of things right here. And for impact, rather, the pilots to land in very well, we're just trying to prepare for landing, and within the next few minutes we'll be landing down with this podcast. But before we land it down, CC4ED, Malamungu, I just want now us to create a scenario of how some of the challenges you've been facing in implementing this project, and what are those things you're trying to put together to navigate these these challenges, and what do you look ahead as we leave this studio room?
Well, I think one of the challenge which I think we have been facing for really years, not only in this project, is participants retention.
Award winner.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right over there. And for those who have
Possibly.
been watching the Impact Radar podcast, we are coming to the end over this. And remember, this podcast will be coming your way each and every other time. You make sure that you subscribe to this channel, you click that alarm bell, and so that you'll be able to get it each and every other time. And above all this is that we must be able to take time and do a tourism to the settlement and see what Platform for Africa is doing, CC4D is doing, and then at the end of it, we'll come to appreciate that a refugee is not actually a person who is to be camped, but someone who is to be settled in the communities where they live in. Thank you very much. We catch up on next time, but for now, we pause it here. We'll continue whenever you see these mics and the studios set. Thank you.